السيدات والسادة، نبدأ معكم الجلسة العاشرة من القمة العالمية للمرأة. ستكون الجلسة تحت عنوان المرأة في مراكز التفكير والاستشارات السياسية. ترأس الجلسة دكتور بلهول أو الدكتورة دبي بلهول، مؤسس والرئيس التنفيذي لمعهد فكر الإمارات العربية المتحدة. المتحدثون الدكتور ونان شياو، نائب الرئيس التنفيذي لمؤسسة آسيا باسيفيك للتبادل والتعاون الصين. أليسا وحيد، عضو مجلس إدارة مؤسسة نهضة العلماء إندونيسيا. الدكتورة كونول، الأكاديمية الأذربيجانية الوطنية للعلوم أذربيجان. والبروفيسور أفتاب كمال باشا، جامعة جواهر لال نهرو الهند.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you all to the 10th session of our forum today. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Dubai Bilhol. I'm the founder of Fikr Institute, which is an interdisciplinary think tank based here in the UAE, and I'm delighted to be chairing this panel of esteemed speakers today to discuss the role of women think tankers and the role of women in political policy research and advice. Broadly speaking, this session we will be able to hear firsthand from expertise of different contexts and different continents, and we'll also be able to have a very honest debate and discussion on I would say the future of policy research, strategy development, as well as high-level political recommendations that may be applicable to both regional and global settings. So allow me to first introduce the panel. We have with us Mr. Huan Shou. He's the Executive Vice President of the Asia-Pacific Exchange and Cooperation in China. Ms. Elisa Wahid, the board member of the Nahdatul Ulama in Indonesia, and Dr. Konul Bonizadeh from Azerbaijan's Academy of the Sciences, and last but definitely not least, Professor Aftab Kamal Basha from the Jawahir Lal Nehru University. So we will be starting the session with a few opening remarks, and I'll give it over to Mr. Huan for his intervention. Go ahead, please.
好，谢谢。我首先要感谢组委会确定了这个话题，因为在我以往从事智库过程中，第一次怎么样把女性在智库中发挥作用的这个话题提炼出来，我想是有着一个特别的意义。我们众所周知，智库主要是一个我们说做顶层设计，第二最重要的是在一个国家的大的一个对外和对内的一个战略定位上，在发挥一些作用。那么在这样的一个作用中，女性她扮演一个什么角色？我们首先要回归到智库，它在发挥什么作用？它们两者之间的一种关系上来讲，我来分享一下我的几个观点。第一个，当前的智库所有都聚焦全球的重大问题。而今天全球的重大问题，我认为主要是在两个层面。第一个层面就是我们如何解决一个可持续发展的问题，或者就是我们如何既解决，在联合国的千年发展目标中，就是如何解决贫困，一个如何解决可持续发展。而恰恰在这个问题上，我们全球有2位女性做得非常不错。一位是美国的格莱美Foundation， 它的创始人就是一位女性，叫苏珊。我们知道Yolos，就是这个应该是那个孟加拉的这位拿到诺贝尔和平奖的这个，当年他就从这个基金会走出来，他是他国际部主任。那时候我曾经给他做过一些方面的一些工作。第二个呢，就是我们讲的可持续发展。其实联合国今天派到日内瓦 主持可持续发展的副总干事长，也是一位女性。所以说，我在想，女性在实现联合国千年发展目标中，无论在解决贫困，无论在推动可持续发展中，不仅仅来自于我们刚才讲的这2位女性，其实有很多女性在这个领域中发挥的重要作用。那么第2个问题，就全球的第2个议题，就是战争与和平的问题。在阿布扎比，应该是卢浮宫在这儿建了一个。那么我们到卢浮宫，在巴黎啊这边我们也去过的第4楼，有个非常著名的一幅油画。这个油画就是自由女神引领人民。其实为什么用妇女的一个角色，在表达对人民的一种自由的引领？其实全世界在表达战争与和平的时候，在很多层面上，实际上是在运用女性的力量，或者运用母爱的力量来表达的和平。所以说，我想针对当下这样的一个就是说全球关注的问题，女性她本身就扮演了一个角色，本身也演绎了这个角色的独特意义。那么第2个层面就是在政策的制定层面上，那么女性在面对的这几个政策的制定上，我们想它有它的独特性，也能发挥它的特别作用，甚至某种程度上在执行层面也有它的作用。因为在执行层面，作为智库来讲，其实要承担着很多我们说的危机公关作用。其实今天穿梭在世界，解决到地区争端的时候，其实都有很多女性的特使，她们在解决世界一些棘手的问题。我这次参加这个会议，看到这个话题以后，我其实因为今天我们开幕式有印度总统给我们支持，今年我们 G20 会议是在印度，所以我昨天也向印度的 G20 峰会提出了个建议。因为 G20 峰会其中一个板块讲非政府组织在全球治理中怎么发挥作用，其中我把今天的我们的议题告诉他，我们希望在 G20 峰会里面，我们继续来探讨这个话题。那么中国文化呢，在讲了一个2024年进入9火运。9火运中最明显的特点，就强调一个女性将是未来世界的一个引领力的作用。那么我们想，我们今天这个主题恰恰与东方或者是中国文化找到一个惊人的吻合，它既是个巧合，同时它也许就是一种互动。我们希望未来在全球的治理上，在推动世界的和平与发展上，我们女性发挥更大的作用，借助智库这个平台。谢谢大家。
Thank you very much. I think it's a very important point you bring up on the role of women in NGOs, as well as empowering women in NGOs and grassroots movements. I'll come back to you on that once we go into questions. I'll give the floor to Ms. Elisa.
Thank you, Ms. Chair. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. For opening our discussions, I would like to share my experience in working in advisory roles and a think tank in Indonesia. We have 3 kinds of people globally. A person of ideas, a person of strategy, and a person of action. I am a person of strategy, so I would be talking about sharing about the strategies and how to work in a more effective way in think tank and policy making. For me, for my personal journey, I started this journey of working about 12 years ago. There are 2 sides of bringing women into policy making, advisory roles, and think tanks. The first one is personal capacity. Leadership is influence. And to have influence, you need to have trust by the people that you want to lead. And I learned about this quote that I really love. Without integrity, no one listens. Without trust, no one follows. So we have to make sure that we have the capacity to lead, to be able to come into a think tank and a policy making work. And the second one is about how to make sure that our work as women leaders in think tank and advisory roles are really effective and effecting changes. So for me, usually I would go with the framework that I learned from Professor David Elcott from New York University. He said that for a sustainable change, you need to work on 4 aspects. The first one is building a sense of urgency. So making sure if we want to bring voices of women, perspective of women, and women's experience in policy making, we have to make sure that we can build a sense of urgency on why we need women to be in that forum. And the second one is to make sure that we have the buy-in from other stakeholders within the think tank itself. Because if we get the buy-in, it will be easier for us to lead the change. And then the third one, something that sometimes it's forgotten, is about the capacity for change. We want to make sure that the women within the think tank also have the capacity to effect change. If we want to accelerate the change, then we need to have more skillful women within the think tank. And then, of course, the last one is about actionable first steps. Sometimes we talk a lot, but we don't. We have a wide gap between knowing and doing. This is the knowing-doing gap that we need to work on. So effective role within policy making institutions for women, mostly about personal leadership, and then to find how to work more effectively. But I always believe that we need women voices, women's perspectives, and women experience in policy making, because I believe that we can only achieve sustainable and just and peaceful society by bringing more women into the policy making. Thank you.
Thank you. I fully agree with that. We'll go to the next speaker, Dr. Konul.
Yes, thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank Sheikh Fatima bin Mubarak. It's an honor for me to be here, and it's an honor for me to present my homeland, Azerbaijan, here. I'm from Azerbaijan, from the land of fire, and I would like to say some words about Azerbaijani woman. Who is she? Azerbaijan is the first democratic republic in the East where women were given the right to vote. It was in 1918. And women had their own journal, Light Woman, and they had right to include, to build young republic. And I think it was a respect. It was a traditional respect to Azerbaijani women. Our national flag, tricolor flag, has 3 colors. First is the blue. It means Turkic heritage. Azerbaijani woman is fighter. And if we look at history, we can see that Azerbaijani woman was always along his brother, his husband, his son, and fighter for her homeland, for peace. And it's same today. Today, Azerbaijani woman is fighter again. And we can see it in our old books, masterpieces, and today. The second color in our flag is red. It means that Azerbaijani woman, Azerbaijan is progressive. And Azerbaijan woman is progressive too. Today, Azerbaijani woman is poet, leader, politician, fighter, philosopher, and she can be a soft power too. We can see it in the image of modern Azerbaijani woman in our first lady, Mehriban Aliyeva, the founder of the president of the foundation, Haydar Aliyev. And I would like to say that from the 2004 years, this foundation has so many practice in the life of every citizen in Azerbaijan. And the third color in our flag is green. It's the color of Islam. Azerbaijani woman is Muslim, and she is a keeper of her family and her society. And she is a true servant of Allah. And I would like to say somewhat about the Nabat Khanım Ashurbayli, who built the big mosque in Baku, Tezepir Mosque. And she built it, she financed the building of this mosque. So we have a tradition, and Azerbaijani woman embraces all these three traditional lines. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll go to Professor Aftab.
Thank you, Chair. It's an honor to be here the Global Summit of Women. But when the organizers approached me to speak in one of the sessions, I thought they have dialed the wrong number. I was not very sure. I said, please double check. Then they insisted, and they said, perhaps they had done some ground research work, and somehow they discovered that I have been supervising and guiding students for over 4 decades. And the statistics they reeled out from my MPhil and PhD students turned out to be female students. It was a pleasant surprise to me also to be reminded. Perhaps that's one reason why I'm here to speak in the Summit of Women. I have been associated with teaching this region, what we call West Asia and North Africa, including Iran, Turkey, and Israel, and all the Arab countries, for over 50 years. And on this region, history and international relations, I have taught in American universities, in Arab universities, and of course, my home university, Jawaharlal Nehru University, and being director of the Gulf Studies program, which focuses on the 6 GCC countries plus Iran, Iraq, and Yemen. And this is the only area studies program which we have. And I have supervised work on a variety of issues. But my main focus has been the role of women in this region, starting from the pre-Islamic period, then the Fatimid, the Ayyubis, Umayyad, the Abbasid, the Mughal, Ottoman, and Safavid dynasties, how behind the rulers, the women have played an important role in shaping the polities, establishment of educational institutions from Morocco to Iran, from Turkey to Sudan, what role women have played in the field of education, in the field of universities, in the field of think tanks, or establishment of libraries, which are still existing in many of the places in this region. So many of my students have traveled to the length and breadth of this region of over 25 countries researching, getting data, and bringing out new facts and establishing new ideas which have prompted some of these old institutions to diversify and work on new areas. And one link has been how India is related to this region, historically, culturally, through several civilizations, whether it is the Nile civilization in Egypt, or the Magan civilization in Oman, or the Dilmun civilization in Bahrain, Eastern Saudi Arabia, or the Assyrian, or the Mesopotamian civilization, how India and these civilizations shared their achievements in different fields, especially religion, education, culture, and philosophy. So some of these topics, both Indian and students from this region and from Europe and other parts of the world, they have researched and brought out new areas which were hitherto unknown to many people in this region, including in India and beyond the world. So some of these things probably have attracted the attention of organizers, and that's where I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. I wanted to start our first general question to the panel on a few challenges facing the think tank world globally. When we think of the global think tank scene, we see a very Western-dominated view of the world, a very Western-dominated view of understanding politics, of understanding women's rights, and while those frameworks work for a Western audience, it becomes largely problematic when it is imposed on non-Western contexts. It's almost as if we cannot talk about advancing women's rights unless we do them in the way that the West thinks we should do it. So how does that, I would say, ideological challenge, how does that inform or impact your own research? We can start with Mr. Wuhan.
中国有一位领导人啊，叫毛泽东，曾经说过一句话，叫“妇女能顶半边天”。中国的女性，其实她在无论是政治、经济、社会、文化中发挥这个作用还是比较强的。我们像比如说，当年我们有一个副总理叫吴仪，其实我们在智库领域也有很多女性。 但是东方的这个女性的发挥的作用呢，它更多的是从东方的一个角度，除了一个政治结构之外，它比较强调叫阴阳。刚才其实我在听他们几位演讲的时候，我在想，就作为智库这个平台，为什么女性要发挥作用？如果说从东方的文化来讲，属性来讲，智库是一个比较阳刚性属性，它要达到一个均衡，其实女性的作用就是变为尤为重要。其实中国在追求女性的社会价值和地位的时候，我们自己也是走了一个曲折的道路，大概100年。我还记得我的那个时候，我们受的最深的一本书，叫西蒙波娃写的《女性》，啊，她的第二性女人，啊，所以实际上中国的妇女也是在过去100年中。 是从西方的妇女女权主义，包括西方的女性的解放运动中，在寻求自身的定位。但是我们也在发现，近10年来，中国的妇女更多的从自身的文化价值中寻找自己，无论是在自己的社会定位、国家定位和未来的承担的世界责任方面，将要发生什么作用。所以我想，你刚才提的这个议题是非常 有意义的，我想可能作为东方、亚洲还是其他的非来自于西方世界的女性，我们怎么去思考？我们如何建立我们女性的价值体系？我们如何把我们自身的文化中结合起来，来定位我们的社会角色？谢谢。
Thank you very much. We'll go to Ms. Elisa.
Yeah. So. About the westernized way of seeing the world, I think the world is evolving right now. Like we know the SDGs motto is leave no one behind. That includes the perspective and the way we see things. So this is a time for inclusion. This is a time for diversity and equality. So we can reconstruct, we can redefine, we can recreate the way we see the world and the civilizations that we are having right now. But for me, we need to focus on the principles, not get trapped by framework of this is coming from the West or this is coming from the East. If it is based on principles of common goods, then we can keep it. In my organization, in Nahdlatul Ulama, we have a saying that that guide us. It goes like al-mukhafadhu ala qadimi soli wa a'udhu bil jadidil asla. To keep old tradition that is still good and benefiting us, but also not be afraid of modernization, of progress, if that progress give us a better option, better world. So making sure that we stay on principles. Sometimes I see, like, for example, when we talk about the women movement, some parts of, even in my community, I mean in the Muslim community in Indonesia, we will face resistance like it's coming from the West. It doesn't really matter where it comes, but what matters is whether it's based on principles. It's based on good values. If it is, then we can continue to work on that with the local wisdoms that we have from our own societies.
100%. Good to you.
First of all, I would want to say that in Arabic, East and West is a shark and garb. So East is a place where the ideas burn. And the garb, the West, is where they continue. And what can they do with this idea we see today? Today, humanity is in crisis, mental and moral crisis. And the Werner Heisenberg, the famous theoretical physicist Heisenberg, said that today the human being, first time in the history, is face to face with him, and there is no partner, no opponent without himself. It means, and he said that we create this nature, and today we are face to face with this nature. So everybody first need to create his nature, and woman is half of this humanity who creates this nature. And another Western historic, Richard Tarnas, he called this crisis as a masculine crisis. And he said that one of the reasons of this crisis is why women were isolated from the life of humanity. She was isolated and she was closed and limited in her feminine personality. So, as Simone de Beauvoir said, she is only second sex. No, woman is not only second sex. She is a human being. She is who Allah created and taught her his names too. So when woman understood it, she can understood who is she. And it's only in the East, not in the West.
Thank you very much, Professor.
Yeah, you have raised a very fundamental question. The chair has raised such a profound question. It can be looked at from different angles. One is the world is in transition. It's in a political flux. It is no more a unipolar world. We are inching towards multipolar world. And in this, the old civilizations are slowly finding their way, whether it is India or China or other Asian civilizations, which were for centuries victims of colonialism and occupation. So the old civilizations are rediscovering their old heritage, their contribution, their achievements, and in that way, the thinking process also is emerging from these societies which are contributing to whether it is a new century of Asia or the new power centers which have emerged from China to Korea to Japan, India, and Indonesia and beyond in the Asian continent. I teach political systems in this region. And when I was a student, I was told that the developing countries' political systems should have all the structures which the Western political systems have. But soon I realized whether it is Saudi Arabia or Oman or any other country were functioning political systems, where they had almost all, but they had a different take, whether it is democracy or existence of monarchy or various other structures. It is possible that they can have their own majlis system, for example, which is quite popular and working well in some of these Gulf countries, or the international law. The perspective from Asia, from India, from Algeria, or from Iran, or Turkey, or some of the Southeast Asian countries. There are very renowned international scholars who have specialized in different aspects of international law. And that looks at the Asian narrative, not necessarily the Western narrative. So in that way, the new think tanks which have emerged in many of the Asian countries or even African countries or Latin American countries, they are looking, the scholars from these think tanks, from these universities and other research centers, they are looking at social problems, political problems, cultural problems, gender issues, climate change, sustainable development, all of these things, how they can be very different, because the type of development which Europe and America and the Western countries have adopted is simply not sustainable, given the limited resources we have and the damage these type of developmental practices have landed us in severe climate problems affecting the developing countries, the countries in the South. So a new narrative, new attempt to reinterpret the ways and means of development is emerging from these countries. So in that way, I think in the future there will be many more studies, policy studies which emerge from these countries which will increasingly adopt a different type of development process which will be more useful and more practicable and sustainable in these countries. For example, even on the issue of, social issue like family, in the Asian or Oriental context, it is the family values, stability, respect for parents, elderly people, teachers. These are fundamental. And in the Western societies, you have a different narrative, where the breakdown of the family is common. I have taught in many Western universities, the kind of student-teacher relationship is very different from what you find in India, for example, or in other Asian countries, where the knowledge imparted by the teachers and other gurus is valued immensely, and the respect teachers command is very different. So in that way, the social stability, the social values which young children from parents, from their peers, grandmothers, and others imbibe is very different from what the Western societies have to offer. So in that way, your question is fundamental in the sense different narrative is emerging in all encompassing political, social, strategic, economic, and climate change and sustainable development. In that way, I think it is important for us to focus and encourage these young scholars, particularly women, who are at the center of all-round development, whether it is the child development or economic, cultural, or even political ideas which parents imbibe to their children. These are fundamental in that way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My second question is related to the debate on representation and quotas in specific. It's a very divisive issue when it comes to women's empowerment and women's rights. Advocates for quotas argue that they are necessary in order to break down institutional barriers that have stopped women from accessing fields like think tanks, policy, parliament. Debaters on the other side of the discussion argue that no, this evolution needs to be organic, it should not be forced, and that imposing quotas may further exacerbate the problem in the long run. So I want to ask you, is quotas, are they a good idea? You'll start, thank you.
我觉得这个是一个非常好的主意，尤其这一点对于中国女性来讲，我们应该不仅是向西方的女性学习，甚至我们还向印度的女性学习。就是我们知道，我们东方的女性很多的，除了关注家庭之外，她们比较注重在教育啊、文化，甚至慈善这个环境。但是一个社会的发展，毫无疑问，它的顶层设计是决定了这个社会发展一个最重要的因素。所以说我经常想，不仅女性的权利来自于整个社会的权利，来自于国家的走向，女性要更多的去发声。而这种发声，除了我们用传统的媒体，包括我们从其他的不同角度之外，包括女性的参政，参与到议会啊，参与到竞选之外，其实从智库的角度来提供顶层设计。这个顶层设计很大的程度，包括从立法的层面来讲，保证了女性的社会权利，所以这是非常重要的一点。我们也想借助这样的一个活动，其实也是呼吁很多女性参与到智库，通过这个智库去推动这个国家的整个的制度建设，包括它的法治建设，从而为全球的女性，包括全球的治理上发挥一个更重要的作用。
Thank you very much.
It is a very difficult question. In regards to women's representation, sometimes it's easy to be trapped into the debate whether there would be quotas or not, because right now we're seeing the progress on women's capacity to lead and to influence. But my question would be on another topic. Would we consider about quotas for people with disability? If we want to get their views on everything, would we put them in a direct competition without any affirmative action? If we would say yes, then we would have to say yes also to the representation of women in situation where the status of women are not yet close to the status of the male counterpart. If it's already in the same, like just a little bit of discrepancy, then yes, we can do like a open competition on the capacities and get them to participate. And I would believe that we would have many women eligible for that positions, because the access to all the capacity buildings, opportunities are in abundance for women in that area. But in other aspects where women's status is not yet equal, then we would have to make sure, like for example, in rural areas where the community is still operating with patriarchal point of views, making decisions about, like for example, in Indonesia we have the what we call the village fund, where the villages get fund from the government to support the development. But we know in villages in Indonesia, we do not have equal opportunity for women yet. So making sure that women are represented in the local local consultation on how to disperse the fund is really important, and it should be affirmative, because if we don't do the affirmative strategy, then there would be no voice of women in that consultation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, it's really a hard question. So I try to explain or create a view, and you can answer the question yourself. First of all, I want to say that the development of thought has two regularity. First of all, that at the decisive moments of the development of thought, the role and activity of the thinker woman are increasing. Increasing only on this case. Only on this case, humanity can go to the next stage of its development. Otherwise, humanity will go around in circles, and this will lead to depression and passivity. And when I saw so many clever women here, I think that today, or global today, is a decisive moment in the life of humanity. And another regularity in the development of humanity is that the woman is the face and background of the society and his family. No matter what woman, maybe housewife, philosopher, writer, politician, sister or wife, no matter. And the woman knows society from the inner side. And I often hear the question, why so few women philosophers? Yes, it's fact that there are so, women philosophers are in minority. But man has so many time to create his environment, his mini environment. And he has so many time to think about universal truth, about universal harmony. But woman lives in real life, and she is the part of the real environment. And she has no time to think about universal.
Yes, true.
But she should touch her child. Touch her child, the national values, the moral, what's the truth, what's the false, and she have to teach her child. And she is the closest and the first environment of his husband, of his child, of everybody. Everybody here, the closest environment of everybody is here is woman. That's why I said that the woman is the face and the background of society. So the woman should to improve herself. To improve herself because how she is light and she is clever, so her environment will be light and wise. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Professor?
Yeah, this is again an important question. We in India are very proud to have the women hold top positions, whether it is president who addressed the summit yesterday, or the earlier woman president, Mrs. Pratibha Patil, or the prime minister, the first woman prime minister in the world, Mrs. Indira Gandhi, way back in 1966. It was later on Golda Meir became prime minister in Israel, and then Benazir Bhutto, Khalida Zia, and Sheikh Hasina, and Sri Mava Bandaranaike, and many others in other countries. We have had not only the Speaker of the Lok Sabha, that is House of the People, or the upper house by women who led the houses, but also state governors, state chief ministers. The first Supreme Court judge was from the southern state of Kerala, Fatima Bibi, first judge, and of course several ambassadors, vice chancellors, ministers, including IAS officers, foreign service officers, police officers, so on and so forth. All of them reached this top position without quota or reservation, purely on their merit. But the basic point, how and why they reached this top position, was the availability of education. For them, in many southern states, the level of education literacy is very high. For example, Kerala, or Tamil Nadu, or Karnataka. There is disparity between North and South India. The indicators in South India are far ahead in all of these. That's how we have the girls outperforming the girls, or the number of women teachers and leaders from South are doing much more better, and also because of the private institutions, Christian schools or minority institutions who have done exceedingly well. But in my own university, I have seen over the last 40 years that some of the students who were able to get through the quota, because we have reservation from backward districts, educationally deprived areas. And as a girl child, we also give 10 points out of the 100 points. So the girl child has been able to get much more representation and improve her skills, and went on to give leadership in administration, in journalism, in teaching, and so on and so forth. So in that way, in some areas, it is required, quota system. But unfortunately, at the political level, the leaders have not been able to come together. There was a proposal to have 33% of the seats reserved in parliaments and legislature, but for various reasons, the parties have not come together. But in many of the educational institutions, there is quota, which has helped the girl child, and also scholarship schemes. For example, there is one unique scholarship from the central government and state government where if a parent has only girl child, she is given scholarship throughout her studies. So which has helped many families which would otherwise have not acquired education or better job and their critical role in the society. So in some areas, it has to be a well thought out process wherever it is required. For example, as I said, in South India, many of the girls from even backward areas, they perform very well because of the educational institutions, well-established educational institutions. But in some areas, the reservation or quota system is essential to bring them on par with other students. So in that way, it has to be a happy blend of reservation and encouragement in other fields. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have time for one more question, and given this is a research and policy panel, I would like to end on a data-related question. Should research methods incorporate a gendered perspective? Meaning, when we want to study things like the role of women in the workforce, or we want to measure the productivity of female workers versus male workers, there are a lot of factors that we don't put in the study and the research question that may hold women back in comparison to their male counterparts, particularly on issues like family care and familial obligations. So should data have a gendered lens, or would that not be in the benefit of women? Should men ask for more rights on that debate? We can start with Mr. Wang.
好，刚才谈到这个人力资源的问题，在这里呢，我想分享一个中国目前的现状。中国目前受高等教育，如果说在社会文理层面，男性和女性的比例是2比8，20%是男性，80%是女性。中国在硕士，尤其在博士这个层面所受教育是1比90，就是90%都是女性接受了博士和硕士的教育。那么从这个受教育的程度来看呢，中国目前在从事智库研究方面的人力资源这个问题，倒是没有这个问题。但是另外一个问题，主要是产生在，就是说他们是否去选择从事智库这个工作，尤其是是否选择从这个角度去来推动妇女的权益和去维护妇女的利益。所以这个呢，又是个观念的问题。所以我们非常希望呢，在这个问题上，尤其面对于中国女性的问题上，打开这个观念，这就是我们的一个非常希望要做的一个工作。谢谢。
Thank you very much.
Okay, I will answer that by taking one example from the Indonesian journey. Back in 1960s, we have the two largest women organizations within the Muslim organizations. Muslimat from Nahdlatul Ulama, this is the biggest women's organization, Muslim organization, and then Aisyah from Muhammadiyah. Because they operated birth clinics, they still operate birth clinics everywhere around Indonesia. They had this data on the high maternal mortality rate and infant mortality rate. So they took this data up to the head of the leadership within their organizations and asked for responses from the ulamas, from the religious leaders, the male religious leaders. They pushed through until they get response from the male ulamas. Because of this initiative, when the government of Indonesia started implementing the family planning and population control issues by Rio Declaration and then Cairo, the religious leaders in Indonesia were ready to support, and now Indonesian family planning program is acknowledged as one of the best, one of the success story, and religious leaders from all over the world are still studying about this involvement, engagement. That happened because the women gave the data without bringing in the experience of women, and especially the data from the forefront, from the field. It would be the policy making would not be completed, would not be complete, would not be comprehensive, and would not address the respective issues. So for me, data should be gender-based and had to incorporate women's perspective.
Thank you very much.
One ancient Greek scholars said that if you ask about the life of Aspasia, so you ask about half of humanity. Aspasia is the teacher of great philosopher Socrates and mother of rhetoric. So I think that if woman is half of humanity, but woman is the mother of another half of humanity. So woman, as I said, is the closest environment of everybody. So woman is very important. But when I studied the history of thought, I saw that every clever man, every philosopher and man philosopher never denied the role and mind of a woman. And some of them had women teachers, as Socrates or Muhyiddin Ibn Arabi or Gottfried Leibniz. They had women teachers. And they discussed their ideas with women thinkers, women. And when I investigate the history of thought, I see that when another half of humanity, women, are limited, so it means that the half of the truth is unfinished and unrealized, dark. And it means that the truth is not completed. And I think that when I saw the image of woman in the history of philosophy, the statue of Venus of Milo, do you know, is a famous statue in the Louvre in France. The symbol of beauty, symbol of tenderness, woman, but without arms. And nobody can imagine her arms. And I think when a woman cannot think, cannot complete the other one, the other half of humanity, she is a Venus of Milo. So she needs helps herself. And when she helps herself, it means that she helps all humanity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bessie.
Some societies are patriarchal. The male-dominated society, there are issues. So I would underline the significance of data. Data. Without statistics, it is very difficult to get funds. Unless you have data, concrete data, to convince the male decision maker, it is talking in the abstract. We need to have concrete data. So in that way, the facts and statistics are vital in order to gain or earmark funds for the development of women and female child in any sector for that matter. And of course, you have women teachers, doctors, nurses, so on and so forth, in many critical decision-making areas. Even in a country like India, many of the top posts are simply not given because of gender issues, gender discrimination. So in that way, if we have statistics, if we have data, facts, it will be easier to convince the other section of how important the role of women also is in a society if it is to be egalitarian. I mean, the equality which one talks about without statistics, it will be meaningless. So I would underline that your point for policy making, data is fundamental. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to follow up on that, Professor. Do you think there's a difference in significance between qualitative and quantitative data when it comes to research related to women?
Yes, indeed. You see, once you have the quantity, you can see the quality in which it is lacking. Like I said, the top corporate jobs in India, very few women decision makers are found, handful of them.
Yeah.
So in that way, the top jobs in corporate or even in the, I go for the federal interview board, which selects top police officers, administrative officers, and foreign service officers. There also there is a problem. So data in terms of how much is the percentage of women gives us a clue as to in which direction our societies are moving in future. So in that way, data is very critical.
That's very well noted. I would like to thank our esteemed panelists today for this engaging discussion, and as well as the audience for their kind attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
نشكر كل من رئيسة الجلسة دبي بالهول، مؤسس والرئيس التنفيذي لمعهد فكر الإمارات العربية المتحدة، ونشكر المتحدثين الدكتورة ونان تشياو نائب الرئيس التنفيذي لمؤسسة آسيا باسيفيك للتبادل والتعاون الصين، أليسا وحيد عضو مجلس إدارة مؤسسة نهضة العلماء بإندونيسيا، الدكتورة كونول الأكاديمية الأذربيجانية الوطنية للعلوم أذربيجان، وكذلك نشكر البروفيسور أفتاب كمال باشا جامعة جواهر لال نهرو الهند.